Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to have you all today. Excited to share the things that we've been working on for the Broad Street Boardwalk and also get your feedback. I'm Kimberly Sargent. I'm a planner in the Atlanta City Studio. And if you don't know what that is, it's a pop-up urban design studio. We're part of the Department of City Planning, but we have a studio that moves around to different neighborhoods every couple of years. Right now, our office, at least before the pandemic, has been located in downtown. So we've had a focus on the downtown neighborhood. And our kind of big picture mission is really to create phenomenal public spaces in the city of Atlanta. And so the Broad Street Boardwalk really fits that bill, and the City Studio and Jacobs, who you'll hear from here in just a little bit, we're actually the original design team for the Boardwalk. So we're back again to provide some updates on what we're going to be changing about the space. And yeah, really excited to share that with you guys. So a little bit about how tonight's going to go. The first 3 bullet points, I think we're going to go through pretty quickly. Just a little background on how we got to this place with the Boardwalk, what we've heard so far from the public engagement that we've been doing before tonight, and then really what we're working on right now and kind of our short-term plan. But really the bulk of the evening I want to dedicate to hearing from Jacobs of the design concepts that we've been working on with them. To really take what is already a very successful and fantastic public space and really build upon some of the lessons that we've learned and make it so that it's going to be fantastic for the next several years. And then we're going to have some questions at the end. You should be able to type any questions at any point in the chat box on Zoom. We have a couple of staff members on the back end who can help answer some of those questions, but we also may save some of them towards the end so that we can discuss them and give some of the answers to everybody as well. So one of the ways that we're going to be collecting feedback tonight is actually through the Mentimeter Platform. And if you haven't used this, it is a fun, interactive polling website. Most of the feedback questions are not towards the end, but if you want to go ahead and get the screen kind of ready on your device, whether that's your mobile device or your desktop, you can go to menti.com and then use this code on the screen, the 8992649, and that will basically take you to this presentation. And so then when there's an interactive question, you'll be able to interact with that and give your feedback. So I'll give a reminder later, but in case you want to already get that pulled up, I'll let you see it for another second. So we can go ahead and just dig right in. I want to make sure we have enough time to really talk through the design later. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kevin Bacon right now, and he's going to give you a little more background on how we got to this point.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Bacon. I'm the director for our Department of City Planning's Office of Design, of which the Atlanta City Studio is a part of that. In regards to the studio, I was very much a part of the team when we first worked through the initial ideas and concepts for the Boardwalk, working with partners, Central Atlanta Progress, Public Works at the time, now Department of Transportation, along many others, to create this in 2017. It was somewhat fate that the Atlanta City Studio would relocate to downtown a couple of years later, and felt like we were just getting to know the studio space when we all started working from home last year. And rest assured, we intend to be back and have not gone away, still very much working in downtown, as Kimberly suggested, and hope to be at a point in the not too distant future when we can have these conversations back in our studio space. But appreciate everybody joining us tonight. The history of this, as I mentioned, the original product for the Boardwalk was a collaboration among the partners I mentioned. I think it's important to note that when we did this, it was a street that was already closed to vehicles, to traffic, particularly on the Lucky Street side, and there was a desire to do a physical intervention to the space, and there were lots of ideas about what that could look like and how permanent. But the long story, or they say the short story, is our city is relearning what it means to design public spaces again, and for us, that this was a chance to learn and see what worked in a very small space in terms of streets, and especially a space that is a street already works pretty well. The idea for the boardwalk was for it to be a 2 to 3 year pilot project, at which we're just past the conclusion of that. We've learned a lot from that. We partnered with Bloomberg and Associates towards the end of, get this right, 2019 and into 2020 to really kind of help us wrap up that pilot phase and do an assessment of what was working for the deck, both from a structural standpoint to an operation standpoint, from usability. And we got a lot of great feedback from them, and we'll hear some more about that tonight. But I think what we overwhelmingly heard is that despite all of the issues that we're aware of with the deck, and we'll talk about those tonight too, is that the move that we have made into the realm of designing public spaces, that this project is something that we absolutely cannot give up on, that there are things to learn from and improve, and we need to be committed to doing that. Our city is desperate for public spaces. I think the pandemic has emphasized and placed even greater importance on the value of that. So I appreciate the time that they've spent with us, as well as our continued engagement of our partners and DOT and Central Atlanta Progress, and many others, into how we think we kind of double down on the investment in the deck and really improve it as a public space for a much longer term. So I'm excited that we'll be able to talk about those tonight. You're going to see a lot of, I think, great ideas on the table for how we think about how we both improve the physical built structure going forward, and thinking about how we might reconfigure some elements of the deck to improve the usability and the activation of it going forward. This is tied to construction funding that we have for this. So this is something that is going to happen. We're working rapidly. We know that it's closed, that unfortunately that happened. But the timing was somewhat fortuitous, is that we did have this design process lined up and plans to move forward with construction. So many of you, I'm looking at names here, recognize that you've been involved with this along the way since the beginning, many of the events that we've had out there. So thank you for continuing to be a part of that and spending your time with us this evening. And we're eager to hear your thoughts tonight. So thank you very much. And Kimberly, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So I want to do just spend a couple minutes talking about what we've heard so far from everyone. We put out a survey over the last couple of months, really when the boardwalk closed, to get a sense of how people were using the space, before the closure, but really before the pandemic, and get a sense also of what people really loved about the space, as well as some of the challenges that people saw. So the results, I think, are very interesting, if not very surprising. This first slide really showing kind of how long people spend in the space. We got almost 80 respondents, and you can see, most of the people who we heard from in this survey, at least, were visiting this boardwalk weekly or more often. So you can imagine, people who are taking their lunch there or walking through there on the way to transit. And while most people spend less than an hour there, which makes sense to some degree, it felt like 35% spending over an hour there was pretty significant and really interesting. We asked how people were getting to the boardwalk. Not surprisingly, most people are taking non-car forms of transportation to get there, primarily walking, but also using a bike or using a scooter to get to the space. And then we also asked people, what are your favorite things about the boardwalk? And I think, may not be surprised that it's a creative, it's a fun area. You get to people watch and meet with your friends and have a bite to eat. Those are really, really fantastic things about the space. We also asked what some of the, what people liked least about the boardwalk. A number of social issues came up. And a really big one is that people there's a really big interest in seeing the space not just be a lunchtime space. People are really interested in having a more extended nightlife and have this space be open more into the evening, especially the people living in downtown. And then also, as Kevin alluded to, there's been some structural safety issues that people have noticed as those have kind of degraded over the years. So that's good in a sense that that's something that we're addressing, and it's going to be fixed in the next round. And then of course we asked what kinds of programming, thinking of a post-COVID world and when we're all able to be closer to one another again, thinking about what kinds of activities people are most interested in seeing. And people are very interested in, of course, seeing some more pop-up food options, pop-up retail, different performances, an artist space, interactive art exhibits, and those types of activities. So that's something that's definitely on our minds as we start to think about this space in the redesign and post-COVID, and thinking about how we want to interact there and how we want to design for that and design for success. And I also wanted to pass it over to our partners on this at Bloomberg Associates. They've been working with us to do a lot of stakeholder engagement around the space so that we can have a really comprehensive understanding of what's happening and what's going well, what's not going well. So I wanted to pass it over to Amanda Burden, who has fantastically done so much work with us. And yeah, hear from you on what you found.
Thank you, Kimberly, and hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great evening and had a good day. So as Kevin explained, about 2 years ago at the Atlanta City Studio, asked our Bloomberg Associates urban planning team to engage the Boardwalk stakeholders and talk to them about their ideas for the space, what was working and what wasn't, and their ideas for the future. And we talked to local restaurant owners, we talked to nearby businesses, we talked to local service providers, we talked to landlords, we talked to CAP and ADID, and of course, we talked to lots of people who use the Boardwalk. We actually surveyed and interviewed more than 50 stakeholders, asking them what they loved most about the Broad Street Boardwalk and how they thought it could be even better. And we spent, of course, dozens of hours actually both interviewing stakeholders and also observing how people use the Boardwalk and what they were enjoying about it. And what did we find out? Well, first and foremost, Atlantans love the Boardwalk. People we interviewed not only talked enthusiastically about the Boardwalk, they actually wanted to see more spaces like it in downtown. So what design feature is the most important to the Boardwalk's success? Well, we found out the tables and movable chairs, including the Adirondack chairs, are what people use the most and enjoy the most. So when the tables and chairs are out, as you probably have observed, there's more time to socialize, there's more time to eat, there's more time to just chill out and people watch. Also, more people on the Boardwalk means more customers for local businesses. And the skateboarders can't do their thing, damaging wood surfaces, when all the tables and chairs are out. But there were two issues that were raised in our interviews that were problematic, and these are happily now being addressed. The first issue relates to certain maintenance problems, which Kimberly will tell you about right after me. And the second issue relates to how best support vulnerable populations in need of social services. And Tammy Hughes from CAP ADID will talk about the very successful program she initiated to address this important need. So let me say on behalf of myself and my colleague Giselle Sadat, we are thrilled to have been able to play just a small part in supporting the Atlanta City Studio team in moving the Boardwalk renovation forward, and are really excited to see the new design proposals for this very unique and iconic public space. So thank you, and Kimberly, it's back to you.
Thanks, Amanda. We so appreciate your work on that. And I will talk a little bit about some of the current actions that we have going on in relation to the boardwalk. Of course, as you can see tonight, we're in the middle of redesigning the space and trying to go through the procurement process so that we can get it constructed as quickly as possible. We've also been working with Central Atlanta Progress to try to get our installations up in the space, and we actually have one right now that's up that's really fantastic. You should go see it while it's still there. It was put up by Powerhouse Creative, and you can see a little preview of it there on the right. We've also been working very actively in pest management and pest population control and trying to get it under control before the boardwalk reopens so that we don't have that same issue. And going forward, that's something we're going to be focused on as well, ensuring that we can control any of the pest populations. We're also going to be looking at some different types of trash enclosures that can better prevent pests as well as having more regular trash pickup. We also are going to be performing more routine power washing to try to keep some of the grime off of the space and keep it cleaner for everybody who wants to come and sit and enjoy. So I want to pass it over to Tammy Hughes from Atlanta Downtown Improvement District, who's been doing some fantastic work and has some exciting updates on this initiative to share with us.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Kimberly and Amanda, for passing the baton. One of the things that was mentioned earlier in the presentation was the concern for social services around the boardwalk. And the boardwalk is part of the heart of downtown, where I serve as the social impact director, as was said, for Atlanta Downtown Improvement District and Central Atlanta Progress. And we represent the business stakeholders in the downtown who are all concerned with the vibrancy of the live, work, and play space of our downtown. And that incorporates those who have property in downtown and all of the people in downtown. So the investment is in not just the properties or the businesses, but also in the people and the citizens of downtown. Those who live there, those who come to visit, those who view us virtually and know what our downtown means to the city. And so part of that is making sure that we are responsive to the whole of the community, those who are doing well and those who are vulnerable. And so I'm going to speak to the efforts to support our vulnerable populations in the downtown. At the outset of COVID, which we were all affected by, our street homeless community was affected in a way that is different than most of us. The stay-at-home order for most of us meant that we were staying in home, right? So we were staying in our homes under our shelter. For those who experienced street homelessness, staying at home didn't have a lot of meaning for them, other than they were the only ones out because everyone else was at home. And so we began to hear a lot of concerns from our downtown neighbors that, you know, what's going on with our homeless population? It seems to be exploding. Is someone meeting their needs? And actually, there weren't a lot more homeless individuals downtown. They just were the only ones out, right? So people serve people, and the people who had been serving them were sheltering in place at home. They had children at home. They were working from home. And so there was a gap that came about in service to our vulnerable populations. And so that gap is where ADID and CAP stepped in. And we launched this initiative that we called ASSIST. And that stands for the Atlanta Downtown Social Impact Safety Team. And we are, I'm sorry, Kimberly, you can advance the slide. I'll just keep going on. But we are an outreach initiative that speaks to the homeless population downtown. And the city of Atlanta, at its last count, this time last year, had a 31% increase in unsheltered individuals in the homeless population. And that's a 31% increase from 2019 to 2020. So throughout 2020, the homelessness population did increase. And again, we're going to see the largest increase in our unsheltered population again. And there is a concern for mitigating those who are at risk of homelessness. And so we'll be initiating some efforts in that arena as well. But our state of homelessness downtown, this is kind of a picture of where we stood when we launched this initiative and who we knew we would be trying to support. Next slide. It's important to understand the populations and the subpopulations in our unsheltered communities. So you'll see from the chart that there is together 44% of the population is dealing with either serious mental illness or substance abuse disorders. And so when we get calls from our community and they're concerned about the social issues and our vulnerable populations, one of the things that I try to help them to understand is that, you know, people who do the things that they have concerned about, many of them are doing so out of the needs that they have associated with their mental illness or associated with their substance abuse disorders or both, right? And that's a large part of the community that they're seeing in our unsheltered population. So a lot of them have struggles, and we want to make sure that in our downtown spaces that they represent a space for grace, right? And so that we are meeting the needs of these our vulnerable populations, our street homeless individuals, in a way that doesn't just represent enforcement, but also represents a opportunity for them to be supportive. So all of the issues around what we do in our strategic action with the Assist Initiative are efforts at not being punitive to their situation, but trying to be redemptive and supportive. And so the way our spaces are laid out have a lot to do with that, and how they feel supported in those spaces help them to feel that there is redemption in them moving from homelessness into a state of stability. And so that's what we try to represent. We're a conduit for our public spaces. And we obviously can't meet the needs of the whole of downtown, but we do serve the 220 blocks of the improvement district, and we'll cross over. You know, we don't have these hard lines that, no, you're across the track, so we can't reach out to you. That we try to be responsive to anyone who's in need. With our Assist team, we are a mobile response team, and we take calls mainly from business owners, any downtown stakeholders. We get several calls from the residents downtown, anyone who's concerned about a vulnerable person. We ask them to reach out to us, and we will respond. Again, not in a way that is enforcement. That's not what we represent. We want to represent to them an opportunity to have their needs met, because that's what they're doing. Most of what they're doing is out of survival. And so we began operating September of 2020. And initially we were going through the end of the year because our hope was that we'd have a significant handle on COVID at that time. But COVID, was stronger than all of us had accounted for. And so at December 31st, the board of directors at the Downtown Improvement District agreed to reinvest in the Assist Homeless Outreach Initiative to continue on into 2021. But at December 31, we took account of our data and realized, kind of to our amazement, that we had engaged over 900 men, women, and children who were experiencing unsheltered homelessness on the streets of downtown. We were able to directly connect them to temporary housing, is what we call it, on their way to permanent housing. And that represents shelter. And what shelter represents is an immediate end to their unsheltered, to their street homelessness, right? And so that spoke to us and helped speak to the community and what we were trying to do. And we remain connected to many of them as they're on their path to ending homelessness. We aren't the solution to homelessness and haven't put that forth, but we are a link in the chain to get them on the path and move them along, to move from street vulnerability into a state of stability in whatever that looks like for them. So we were happy to do it, and we're happy to continue forward. Kimberly. And just a note of how important it is for outreach teams as we look towards the future. You know, we all have some way to connect, right? And so for our street homeless citizens, outreach is their way to connect to services and supports that will help them. I'm not a proponent of having services in a place that requires the person in need to come to them. I believe that if you have the service, you take the service to the person in need because they have the need. And if you don't bring it to them, then they don't need you, right? So we want to meet their need as best as we can. Again, we can't solve homelessness, but we want to make sure that we're responsive to the property owners, the business owners, the residents, and our visitors who come to downtown. So ultimately, we represent the vibrant pictures and the vibrant ideas and all of the activities that go on in and around the boardwalk and our downtown as a whole. So thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of our vulnerable populations.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for all the great work that you guys are doing. I know that it means a lot to a lot of people. Thanks for joining us tonight to share it with us too. Okay, so now I am excited that we can share some design concepts with everybody. I can't wait to hear what everyone thinks. I'm going to pass it over to Lee Pollock at Jacobs, who's been working for the past month or so on these. And yeah, Lee, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kimberly. Lee Pollock with Jacobs. I'm a principal landscape architect with the urban design and planning team. As Kimberly and Kevin had mentioned, we were the original team that worked on the boardwalk to begin with, and we felt that moving through a series of issues and opportunities that have come up over the past couple of years could really help us understand how we move through the options. And of course, all of this was built around a lot of the great work and input that the Bloomberg team has prepared and the research that was done in order to inform the work going forward. We have prepared 3 options for you to, if you could take one step back there, 3 options that we're calling rebuild, renew, and resolve. Those are the 3 options that we'll sort of work through tonight and take a look at, and everybody can react to. We did want to take a second to take a look at the space as it exists today, after it was built. 1 forward there, Kimberly. We know that the space has had a considerable amount of success, and it shows in the pictures and through the activity and use that the space has gotten over the past couple of years. In addition, we took a look at what people have been saying about the space. It builds upon the work that Bloomberg, 1 forward, Kimberly. So the space has obviously moved from what you saw in the previous image, and we took a look at the existing boardwalk today. There's some issues that are out there relative to structure. We know those are some things that need to be dealt with. The space tends to get a little dark during the daytime as well, with the considerable canopy that's up above. And when the tables and chairs are removed from the space, the space doesn't feel quite as vibrant and aesthetically pleasing, and doesn't have that visual interest and impact that everybody is accustomed to when the space is filled with people and filled with the movable tables and chairs and Adirondack chairs. And there's also no permanent furniture out there at the moment. There's no usable tabletops and spaces that people can use when those tables and chairs are moved from out of the space. The festoon lighting out there is successful and does provide some vibrancy. Actually, in the image behind me here is the space at nighttime. So it does have quite a nice effect that does make the space feel interesting and useful at night. But when those tables and chairs are removed, the space is not quite as active as we'd like to see it. Okay. We took a look at the general issues and opportunities. The space is successful. You know, we want to maintain the visibility across the space. The openness across the space is quite successful, so that people can sit and people watch and feel like there's a way from point A to point B through the space. We do want to provide structural integrity to the boardwalk system. That's one that is a key to improving upon what's out there today. We want to reuse the existing materials as best possible. The material is good. The implementation has some issues, and that's going to be dealt with. The performance stage is definitely an area that's been successful, and we want to maintain that for sure as we go forward here. And then we want to address the drainage issues that are predominantly being, the drainage is being blocked at the north end of the boardwalk. And there are some things that we can do to improve that drainage through the site going forward as well. On the right-hand side of the slide, we are addressing the redesign in sort of four buckets: the aesthetics, the bikes, the lighting, and the pest control. With the aesthetics, knowing that the space has sort of lost its vibrancy when the tables and chairs move out of the space, we want to think about the potential to add color to the space in some way, shape, or form, whether or not that's color in the benches or in the plantings. Those types of things, we can definitely add some color and vibrancy to the space. We want to take a look at unique bench and table seating arrangements that could increase the usage in the space, potentially with some fixed opportunities, fixed table and chair opportunities that are in the space as well. And then, of course, a landscape upgrade. That's an area where we can make an impact very easily right off the bat. Okay. Bikes and skateboarders, there's a range of opportunities to inhibit to some degree the amount of use or the locations that the skateboarders are using. As a former skateboarder myself, I know that you're never going to be able to prevent that from happening, but certainly we can redirect where those skateboarders are using the space and move them potentially out of the center of the space. Some of the ways to do that are obviously with the planters, and that's been done over the past couple of years. And then a potential to think about bench redesign in a way to keep skateboarders from using the benches as a playscape, so to speak. Okay. Lighting is definitely one of those. I mentioned the festoon lighting. The nighttime lighting is successful and it creates a vibrancy to the space. We do think that there's some additional lighting opportunities, whether it's tree lighting, under bench lighting that casts a glow on the ground plane of the space, and really just provides some additional visual interest outside of the street poles as well as the festoon lighting. So those are some things that you'll see going forward. And then the pest control. The pest control is actually one that took a fair amount of interest at the beginning of the conversation for the team, but it actually seems to be a pretty simple solution, honestly. You cut off the food, you cut off the amount of pests that you can see. As it turns out, the primary area of interest for the pests is the open trash containers. And with the additional usage of the space, there's a significant amount of increase in the amount of waste that's around the site. So if we remove the waste, we remove the pest control problem. And then of course the city is going to maintain bait traps and those kinds of things to take care of the pests in the current condition that's out there today. And so that's a positive going forward with the space, and that'll be dealt with going forward. Okay. So we'll start with structural integrity. The space was originally constructed with a pedestal system. The primary goal behind the pedestal system was that it was quick and easy to build in the time frame that we had. It was also very flexible in terms of design. And then knowing that this was a temporary system, meant to be either potentially moved or replaced with a permanent condition down the line, that we could reuse the materials in the pedestal system going forward. With the intense use that we've seen on the site and the longevity of the boardwalk going forward, the idea is to move to a more conventional framing system, and that is a framing system that you see there on the right that would be very typical of any type of elevated structure that you would see, whether it's at a house or a commercial property. So that'll move to a more conventional framing system with heavy duty fasteners and those types of things. So the structural integrity will be dealt with in this version of the plan. Okay. In terms of redesign and rethinking the space of how we can create some additional visual interest and additional design amenities, we started pulling some precedents from other places around the country and world. And you know, the common thing that we see is the use of color, the use of variety of seating typologies. So you can see the pop of color of yellow and orange and green and blue. And we have all those things with the movable tables and chairs. But when those tables do happen to move out of the space, we're left with a sort of general palette that's devoid of any color. So we want to work to integrate color when and if those tables and chairs move from the current conditions. In addition, the top center image of the two individuals standing on top of the seating, there is an opportunity for us to create some elevated space within this site, which we don't have currently. And the idea there is to create some additional people watching opportunities, giving different vantage points of the space, whether it's to the north towards Peachtree Street or towards the south. Getting elevated is always something that people like to do and is interesting. And the picture in the center here is of Times Square, and you get some great photo ops and visibility. Okay, next slide. And then thinking a little bit more about the seating opportunities, upper left is, you can see the pop of color in the seating opportunity there. There's some lighting ideas within the precedent imagery and spaces. The stand-up tables in the center there at the top. And then the idea of kind of a staircase seating opportunity in the upper right, which starts to think about elevating within the space. And you'll see that popping up in some of our concepts. And then thinking about lighting and thinking about lighting under benches, casting a light onto the ground plane, which will provide a nice glow in the dusk and evening time. Okay. So option one is rebuild. And the rebuild option is really about taking the success of the space today and refreshing it, which would obviously include the structural integrity issues and the pressure washing and cleaning of the boardwalk and potentially restaining of the decking system. And then taking some of the elements and cleaning them up so that we don't have some of the structural integrity issues within the benches as well. The movable tables and chairs are obviously successful. The Integration of additional landscape is an area where we can improve upon the space considerably going forward. And then getting some more organization to the potted plants that have tended to migrate around the site to deal with the skateboarding. We'd like to have a more fixed location for those individual potted pots and plants. So rebuild is exactly what it sounds like. It's essentially taking the space, rebuilding it in its current fashion, and improving upon it ever so slightly. And you can see here there are some slight changes that may not be readily apparent from what you've experienced out on the site, but there's subtle changes that can help improve upon the space. Okay. And so Kimberly is floating through the views that we did there, and you can see here the rebuild. One of the elements in the center there is a circular planter idea that starts to integrate landscape into the center of the space with a pop of color, still with plenty of room for the movable tables and chairs. Okay. Option 2 is a refresh. The refresh, so what you'll notice is all three of the concepts are essentially building upon the success of the space previously, with the goal in mind of not to dramatically change the space, but to enhance the space. And so refresh is thinking about integrating a pop of color along the western curb line, which is planned north, and Kimberly's pointing out to that bench. And so that's the idea, that there could be a big splash of color along that western curb line. And then to the south is the integration of the sort of Steris idea, the multi-level planes that would be in that photo number 1 down in the left-hand corner. The idea of integrated lighting in picture 2, which could be integrated into the decking system, and that's pretty easily achieved today with LED lighting systems. And then maintaining the stage as well. So there's still enough room for performances and stage activity as well, okay? And if we flip through the visuals, you can start to see that splash of color through the space. The tables and chairs here are off to the left and to the right. The same amount of tables and chairs that are out there today would be maintained within this space. So you have some additional fixed seating opportunities. You have additional landscape. You have a pop of color and some new planters. And then of course you have the pop of color and the Adirondack chairs and the movable tables and chairs. Okay. And then option 3, we're calling resolve, because when you think about successful urban public spaces, you think about all the things that are there with the check marks behind them. So the space as it sits today is dealing with all of these: the community function, the unique character, spatial definition between the buildings that are out there, really taking a difficult street condition and making a flat space that's very usable for pedestrians to sit in. And then very accessible space, really no handicap issues, accessible ADA accessibility issues whatsoever, but also dealing with the stormwater, the environmental issues. We have the tree cover, but we have not dealt with the water flow. And this is an area where we think there's an opportunity for the city of Atlanta and downtown Atlanta to deal with water, which is a bigger goal and strategy for the city of Atlanta. And this site could do its little part in the grand scheme of things. So with that said, there is an opportunity for us to capture, collect, and store water underneath the decking system. So in this view, you don't see it, but it's actually happening. There is an opportunity down to the south portion, which is Plan West that Kimberly's pointing to actually collect the water into bioretention facilities and then allow that water to then leach out and spill into the stormwater system. So the water's cleaned. We've slowed it down. We've collected the sediment. We've collected the debris. Central Atlanta Progress will then collect that down below, remove it, and dispose of it going forward. This option has a terrace and elevated seating system that you can see to the west curb line, which is Plan North. Those terrace systems will look back to the stage to the east, and that's the existing stage that's out there today. And then, of course, you have the movable tables and chairs, the rebuilt benches, the planters that could have a pop of color as well, and the landscaping. Okay, and these are the views here. The images on the right are sort of experimentation with the use of color integrated into the sides of the benches. Today, the benches are all wood stained. There is an opportunity for us to integrate color into the sides of those benches. Okay. And you can see the view here. And in the image on the left, you can see that terrace elevated seating opportunity, which would then look back to the stage area. And that could be coupled with that under seat lighting, which would cast light down onto the ground plane. Okay. So here are the three options so that you can see them all at the same time. This is an organization for everyone to see precisely because there's subtle changes between the three options, and there's a built-up sort of idea behind each of them. Over to the right are some distinct bullet points about the distinct ideas for the three options themselves. Okay.
Great. So I want to jump back in now and say that if you would like to participate but haven't gotten your menti.com page up, that now would be a great time to do that. And again, for this to work, you would go to menti.com either on your phone or on your desktop, and then use the code on the screen or that Vanessa put in the chat earlier. Type that into the box and it should bring up the presentation that we have in front of you. And then we can move on to the first question, which is, thinking about these three options that Leah's gone through. We'd really like to hear what your favorite aspect is of these designs. And it could be of all the designs, or it could be of one of them in particular. If something really stood out to you that you'd like to share with us, that's something that we're interested in hearing. And so whenever you start typing, they will show up. I'll give everybody a second to make sure that it's working for you. I'll show you the picture again in case you need to take a look at it. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of great things come in. A lot of comments about color, keeping colorful materials, saying adding more color in. Yeah, the flexibility of the designs is great. I love sitting in those chairs and moving around at lunch. You can make a table for 1 or a table for 8. Oh, interesting idea there about use for irrigation or use in public bathrooms. I'll give you one more minute to think about it. Yeah, but these are all really great comments. Public art? Question mark or exclamation point? Oh, great. And there's, so we can, if you miss, oh, sure, this would be a good time for that. I see a question in the that got sent over. Lee, could you talk through the bioretention concept just a little bit more as people are thinking through this? Oh, could you unmute first?
There I am. So we do know that the water from the north really moves around the corner onto Broad Street pretty quickly. And it brings a lot of debris with it, which is expected in urban conditions. So, we're not going to solve the city of Atlanta's stormwater problems, but we can certainly do our part in terms of collecting debris and slowing that water down to remove sediment and everything else. And so this diagram here starts to illustrate that opportunity. And we do have about 1.5 feet underneath the decking system for us to slow water down, collect that debris, allow it to move through, and then we can either collect it in rain harvesting tanks that you see in the bottom left-hand corner there, or we can just allow it to sit on the asphalt behind little check dams that are built with stone wrapped in filter fabric. We would then take that water and try to channel it into a landscape concept. There is a little bit of concern being at the curb level condition at the boardwalk level of people wanting to walk through it and move through it from a maintenance perspective. But there is a protected zone to the south, which is to the plan west here. That's a protected zone that we could put water into, allow it to do its part in terms of the plantings and helping those plantings thrive, but also to clean that water before it gets released into the stormwater system. So the idea is really to do our little part on this short little section of City of Atlanta open space. And there's an opportunity below this boardwalk system to do that in any way, shape, or form that we see. The difficulty that we see with using the water from an irrigation perspective is getting it up from that tank and into the planters. That's certainly something we can discuss with CAP, who I believe maintains this space on a regular basis. And so we can talk about whether or not we can get that water out of the tanks and into the planters on a regular basis. Does that help, Kimberly?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, if you have any more questions, you can drop them into the chat, everyone. All right, so this looks really great. Thank you for these thoughts. Definitely put some more in the chat if you missed the opportunity. I think once I move past the slide, it cuts off input. So we're going to talk a little bit about seating here. And just before we get there, I do want to say, as Amanda and Lee and Kevin have all talked about, that the seating has been a very valuable and very successful piece of the boardwalk. And we're not really looking at reducing the number of seating options that are there, but we're really looking is what should we be adding more of? What's your favorite kind of seating for different uses, and what should we really look at prioritizing as we kind of look at the space that we have? How can we add what it is that people love the most? So we have a couple of questions about seating here, and I'll let you fill in. So the first one is, which seating style is your favorite for having a meal? And you can choose two options here. There we go. So yeah, you can choose two options here. And having food, eating food, sharing a meal with people was one of the top things that people said that they really loved about the boardwalk. So, not surprisingly here, we see that, the tables and chairs are really popular for that. I'm going to give another second for everyone's thoughts to get put in. And yeah, interesting with the multi-level seating, one of the thoughts behind that is that, somebody could maybe walk up next to it and set their food on it and have a quick bite without having to sit down. So that makes a lot of sense to me as well. All right, it looks like we have people's votes in. I'm going to ask a similar question, but a little bit different. Another thing that people really love about the space is just going to people watch and kind of spend some time outdoors. Sometimes that's maybe by yourself and, just kind of reading a book or studying. A lot of people mentioned meeting with colleagues for, even formal meetings, but also just meeting up with friends after work for, a drink or an ice cream or a piece of pizza. And so really looking for what your favorite seating style is for those kind of activities. All right, it looks like we have maybe all of our votes in. I'll give it one more second. Yeah, so interesting. We all like a little bit different seating for that one, right? That's an interesting outcome. Okay, and then another, just thinking about another thing that people love to do here is they love to come and watch people perform, have concerts and music acts and performance artists come and spend time on the stage. Thinking about how you kind of like to sit and view those kinds of performances. What are your favorite seating styles for that? And again, you can choose 2 on these. Great, it looks like everybody has it in if they're going to. Okay, so another thing that Lee talked about for all the different designs is thinking about how we do lighting. So really want to get a feeling, kind of a temperature check, what kind of lighting everybody likes. We already have some of the festoon and string lighting and a little bit of the post lighting. We're considering how to improve those, whether, how to best enhance safety and kind of the ambiance of the space, but also, thinking about potential for underbench and end ground lighting if that's something that we're interested in seeing. So again, you can choose 2 here. Yeah, everybody loves the festoon lights. Of course, they're so beautiful. All right, it looks like we have a good number of votes in. I'll give it one more second and then we'll close it out. Okay, so that really concludes what the main presentation that we had for you guys, but we wanted to leave a good bit of time for different questions that you guys might have. I saw a couple coming through the chat box. It looks like they may have been answered, but if you would, if there's anybody who wants to speak to them as well, now would be a good time for that.
Hey everybody, this is Vanessa with Department of City Planning. So the one question that we had on the chat was if we were considering bollards for the south end, knowing that that area stays full of people backing up their cars to park in the crosswalk. And people have also parked and backed into the wood and damaged the boardwalk as well.
So that's over here on this end.
Yes. And so I know that we have been considering some type of vertical barriers there. I believe those are planters, Lee, is that correct?
Those are planters. So Vanessa, it's a good question. We know that zone gets used for service, right? So we need to maintain the openness there, but we can certainly make sure that the planters are not movable. And I do think that the planters would probably be best from a visual standpoint as opposed to bollards. So if we can get those planters fixed or heavy enough that they don't get moved, I think that'll do the trick.
And we have another question that came in. Kevin, I was going to bring you in for this one since you're more involved. What's a time frame of starting and for construction?
Sure. We're working as quickly as we can to get there. The getting through our own procurement process is always a challenge, but the good news is we've identified a way through that and are just looking at contractors that might be available to do the work. We really do hope to be under construction and in a good scenario, over the summer, be working on the reconstruction and hope to have it done by the fall. We'll know better once we've gotten through the procurement process and have a contractor on board.
Are there any other questions too on any of the design options or any other comments that you didn't get to make earlier?
I know there was one more comment about the safety of the area during the pandemic and kind of related to the time frame of opening it and reconstruction. And so I don't believe there's anything else, any more information related to that. But we are thinking carefully about the timing, like Kevin had stated, and trying to get our ducks in a row so we're ready for that.
Yeah, certainly the I don't want to say the likely timeline, but certainly the reopening of things is very much the forefront of our decisions and kind of adjusting timelines, not just for this project, but for several things that we have going on. So it is part of the kind of calculation of figuring those things out.
And I got another question as well. Is it possible to allow more reserved parking on Broad Street for vendors serving the office buildings and restaurants?
No.
Jennifer, do you want to take that question?
Yeah.
Hey, Vanessa, this is Jennifer. I realized I said no loudly and forcefully, not realizing I wasn't muted. And I might call on Wesley as well. We are cognizant of the need of that type of loading and unloading activity for both residential uses and commercial uses. The solutions that we've honed in on tend to be on the adjacent intersecting streets. So how can we manage opportunities on Walton Street, Fairleigh, even Peachtree Street, the other adjacencies to those buildings that are a little bit easier to access and aren't as directly in conflict with the pedestrianization of Broad Street. So it's a in-process conversation. And Wesley, if I murdered your good work, speak up.
No, you nailed it. And actually, I'm working with the traffic signal team as recently as earlier today on looking at how Walton Street can better support the loading activities. And so we've discussed many times if we close Broad during the day at Forsyth and Poplar, how that affects everyone that exists on Broad. And so using Walton Street to its full capacity to support Broad Street is really the best option that we have.
Great. Any more questions? I don't want to cut anyone off. If they have something they'd like to ask. Okay, well then, if there's not any more, and if there is, feel free to jump in the chat real quick. But if there's not, then we can give everybody some of their evening back too, which is fantastic. I believe we're going to keep the survey open for a little bit longer, and we're going to send a follow-up email to everybody who's on this call. So if you haven't gotten a chance to take the survey, that you'll be able to do that and provide a little bit more feedback to us about what you're looking for and what you really like in this space as well. Otherwise, Kevin, Vanessa, do you have anything else to add?
Nothing for me.
Just thank you everybody for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, well, we'll be in touch about the next steps, and we look forward to everybody being able to use the space again and hang out and have a great time. So one day we'll get back there.
Thanks, everybody. Have a
Great.
good
Thanks,
evening.
everybody.
Kimberly.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.